Good morning, students. Today I am going to present you a lecture on the topic that is dynamic polymorphism, static binding and dynamic binding. So this was the Java program that I have already discussed in my earlier presentation. This Java program consists of an abstract base class specified by the name furnisher, and inside this abstract base class, that is furnisher, there is one abstract method specified by the name show, and this abstract method have been declared inside the public access specifier section. Now the reason this method show is abstract because it has been specified by the keyword abstract, and as abstract methods does not contain any body, that's why this method simply ends with a semicolon. But if you look at these methods show of the derived class chair and of the derived class table, they contain body, and this body is represented within the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace, and inside its body they have a set of Java statements to be executed. Okay, so these are the set of Java statements to be executed inside the body of its method. So just remember that methods which have been defined as abstract does not contain any body and it ends with a semicolon, whereas the methods which are not defined as abstract, they contain a body, and inside their body a set of Java statements can be executed. Now just see this program. This abstract class furnisher is the base class, so this is the base class, which is the abstract class furnisher, and come below this class chair, which extends or inherits the properties of the base class furnisher, is the derived class, which is represented here. The derived class chair is exhibiting or inheriting the properties of the base class furnisher. Again, there is another derived class table which extends or inherits the properties of the abstract base class furnisher, and this is again represented here. This is the derived class table inheriting the properties of the abstract base class furnisher. Now that there are multiple derived classes which are inheriting their properties from the base class furnisher, that's why this type of inheritance is known as the hierarchical inheritance. So the inheritance that is exhibited by the classes furnisher, chair and table in this Java program is the hierarchical inheritance. Now look at this class demo. This demo class is in no way connected with the classes furnisher, chair and table, because this demo class is not an inherited member of the classes furnisher, nor the class chair, nor the class table. So this is a standalone class, and this has been shown here. So it has been kept separate from the classes furnisher, chair and table. Now just enter inside its class. This class contains the main method, which is public static void main, and since main is the starting point of execution of a Java program, that's why the starting point of execution of this Java program starts from this class, that is demo. Now just come below this main method, enter inside the body and execute the first Java statement, which says furnisher f. So this statement creates an object f of the abstract base class furnisher, okay, that is this class. Now once the object f have been created from the base class furnisher, then again in the next line this object f have been instantiated with the derived class chair, that is this class, with the values 10, 5, red and 3 belonging to the arguments wh, c and w1 respectively for the derived class constructor chair. Then again in the third line, using the same object f of the abstract base class furnisher, it is invoking the show method using the dot operator. But it is invoking which show method? Is it invoking the show method of the base class furnisher, or is it invoking the show method of the derived class chair? Now, since this object f have been instantiated with the derived class chair with the values 10, 5, red and 3, that's why this object f will invoke the show method of the derived class chair, that is this show method, and not the abstract show method of the base class furnisher. So once this object f of the abstract base class furnisher gets instantiated with the derived class chair, so this object f will override the show method of the base class furnisher, and then it is invoking the show method of the derived class chair. So f dot show represents the object f invoking or calling the show method of the derived class chair. And this form of representation, where the base class object f invokes or calls the derived class method show, is known as dynamic polymorphism. So dynamic polymorphism is the capability of calling derived class methods using the base class objects. So it is clear from here that the object f have been created from the base class furnisher. So this object f is the base class object, and with the help of this base class object, it is invoking or calling the derived class method show. Okay, that is the derived class method show of the derived class chair, because it has been instantiated with the derived class chair with the values 10, 5, red and 3. And hence the base class object f, when it gets instantiated with the derived class chair with the values 10, 5, red and 3, then it calls the derived class method, and this process is known as the dynamic polymorphism. Okay, now the same case happens in the next two lines, where the object f have been instantiated with the derived class table with the values 8, 16, blue and 4, and then again the base class object f is invoking or calling the show method of the derived class table, and hence this statement also represents dynamic polymorphism. Now let's come to the next topic, which is static or early binding. In case of static or early binding, the association of method with object is known at the time of compilation. Now, what do you mean by compilation? The compilation is a process when the data members inside a class have been allocated certain memory for assigning values to it. And it is during this compilation process that the compiler checks every statement of the Java program for errors. So two things happen during this compilation process. The first thing is the compiler checks every statement of the Java program for errors, and the second thing is that the data members inside the class will be allocated certain memory spaces for holding values. Now in this Java program there are data members width, height, number of wheels, then number of legs. All these data members will be allocated certain uh, memory spaces for holding or assigning certain values, and this takes place only during the compilation process. And during this process of compilation, if the object associates itself with the methods, then this form of association is known as the static binding or the early binding. Now, if you consider this program, the object f has been created from the abstract base class furniture, and if this object f associates with the method show during the compilation process, then this form of association is known as the early binding or the static binding. Now let's come to the next topic, that is dynamic or the late binding. In case of dynamic binding, the association of method with the object is decided at the runtime. Now the runtime process takes place after the compilation process. That is, after the compiler checks every statement in the Java program for errors, and after the memory has been allocated for the data members to assign or hold values, the runtime process starts. And it is this runtime process that the program starts executing and processes the results to display the output. So in a way, the runtime process takes place after the compilation process of a program. So the objects, if they associate themselves with the methods during the runtime, then it is known as the late binding or the dynamic binding. So from this program, if the object f from the abstract base class furniture associates with the method show during runtime, okay, then this form of association is known as the late binding or the dynamic binding. So just keep in mind that when the objects which have been created from a class associates themselves with their methods during the compile time, then that form of association is known as the early binding or the static binding. And if the association takes place not in the compilation time but during the runtime, then that form of association between the objects and its methods is known as the dynamic binding or the late binding. So I hope you understood the concept of dynamic polymorphism, and I hope you also understood the concept of static or the early binding and the dynamic or the late binding. So that's all for today.